Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today I'm going to make a rolled ice dye design. To begin, I'm going to use a straight edge and place it on the shirt not too far below the armpit of the shirt. Then I'm going to grab the hem of the shirt and fold it up. Then I'm going to turn the shirt over where I have the top part or the neck of the shirt facing me. Then using a washable marker, I am going to make a mark in the center of this fold. Then using an old piece of sinew and a washable marker, I'm going to draw an arc from one corner of this fold to the opposite corner of the fold. I went ahead and sped this part up quite a bit because I kept drawing lines that weren't working out properly. So I just went ahead and sped this part of the video up. I do end up getting a line though that I like, and believe it or not, I can actually follow it on the shirt. So here's the line that I'm actually going to roll that I just drew. And I'm going to start at one corner of the fold, and I'm going to begin to tightly roll the shirt on that last line that I finally drew on the shirt. As I'm rolling the shirt, I'm going to encourage the fabric on either side of this line to go ahead and roll as well. And by the way, I sped that part of the video up quite a bit because there wasn't really anything to learn from that. But I didn't want you confused why there were so many lines not being used on the shirt. So I went ahead and left that part of the video in. But if I ever have done a video and it's either too fast or too slow, if you click the settings icon on YouTube, you can change the playback speed. Either speed it up or slow it down, just whichever is more comfortable for you. So once I had the shirt rolled, I went ahead and folded it in half on that line that I rolled. And then I'm going to hold all of these folds or rolls in place with some kite string. After I went ahead and tied the shirt with kite string, I placed it aside for a few days because I was working on some other projects. So by the time I came back to it, it was completely dry. But it doesn't have to be. Even though this is a really thick fold, I've done several of these while they're still damp, and they seem to work out pretty well. So Dalula Company has a fairly new color called Rich Razzin, which I tried on a flour sack towel not too long ago. And it was a really cool color, but the fold that I used for the towel, I couldn't see some of the color splits as well as I wanted to. So I've built a color palette around that color. And then the setup that I'm going to use for this shirt is I've got a piece of vinyl guttering that I'm going to place the shirt down inside of. And I'm going to use some kite string, which I'm going to tie around the end of the shirt. I'm actually going to go ahead and just loop the kite string through the hole from where I folded the shirt in half. Then I'm going to take one end of the kite string and attach it with a metal clip to the end of the piece of vinyl guttering. That way, whenever I incline this shirt inside of the guttering, it's not going to slide out of the guttering. Then because the shirt is completely dry, I'm going to spray it with a little bit of soda ash solution, which I placed inside of a spray bottle. That will help the dye to stick to the top of the shirt just a little bit better. Before I begin to apply the dye, I'm going to use a washable marker and I'm going to divide the shirt into 4 sections for the 4 different dye colors that I've chosen. Like I mentioned, I chose the color palette for this shirt based upon Rich Razzin from Dalula Company. So I'm going to kind of make that color the highlight of the shirt. I'm going to place it on the rolled and folded part of the shirt, right at the very end. And then I'm going to put another thin line of that color on each of the lines that I drew on the shirt. The next color that I'm going to use is Seafoam from Custom Colors. And then in the final 2 sections, I'm going to use a couple more custom colors dyes. I'm using Dusty Pink and Passion Fruit. I'm adding quite a bit of dye to the top of this shirt because I'm going to see if I can get by without having to turn it over and add more dye to the back side. So maybe I can get by with it by just adding quite a bit of dye to the front and then adding more ice to force that dye down through the shirt. Like I said, this is a pretty thick fold or a pretty thick design. Now I'm going to add a little bit of additional dry soda ash over the top of the die. And then I'm going to add on some ice. For this design, I'm going to use a large chunk of ice. And this ice I made in, they're considered pencil containers, I believe, which I purchased from the Dollar Tree dollar store. They're made out of thin plastic, and I just add water to them, freeze them, and they fit perfectly inside of the piece of vinyl guttering. I do have a little bit of the shirt that isn't covered by the large chunk of ice, but I'm going to add some ice cubes to that area in just a moment. But first I'm going to go ahead and incline the shirt by placing one end of this piece of vinyl guttering down inside of a plastic tote. I'm going to leave the other end of the vinyl guttering hanging over the edge, which is going to incline the shirt. Then, because this fold is thick and I couldn't really get dye down on the very, very end of the shirt, while it's inclined, I'm going to put a little bit more dye down there and add on some ice cubes to that area. Then I'm going to place the shirt aside and I'm going to allow the ice to melt. And after this first layer of ice melted, I came back and I did have quite a bit of undissolved dye left sitting on top. So I added another one of these large chunks of ice to cover the shirt. Then after that layer of ice melted, the only place that I didn't have great color saturation was right at that very end where you saw me add the additional dye just a few minutes ago. So I went ahead and added a little bit more dye to that area, added a little bit more soda ash and some more chunks of ice or cubes of ice to that little area. Then after all that ice melted, I left the shirt alone for about 48 hours before I began rinsing it. To rinse the shirt, I took it to my utility sink and I started rinsing it in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. And you'll notice when I turn the shirt over, I do have really good color saturation all throughout the shirt. And so adding quite a bit of dye to the top and just forcing more liquid through there by adding an additional larger chunk of ice worked out really well. I didn't have to turn the shirt over and repeat the dye pattern on the back side. That's normally what I do for these rolled designs, but I wanted to test it out this time and see if I could get by with just adding enough dye to the front where I didn't have to add more to the back. After rinsing in cold for a while, I went ahead and warmed the water up to hot, untied the shirt, and rinsed in hot water to try to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. But instead of rinsing for a long time, I decided to just go ahead and soak the shirt. And to do that, I ran some really hot water in my utility sink, added some Blue Dawn dish soap to the water, placed the shirt inside, and allowed it to soak. When the water cooled off, I changed it out, and I continued that soaking process until my water was remaining almost clear. Then I placed the shirt along with some Dharma's Professional Textile Detergent into my washing machine, and I washed it using a hot water cycle. Okay, so the shirt has been washed, dried, and ironed, and let's see what this one looks like. Okay, so what do you guys think? So I think this one looks really cool. I like the colors together. In my Rich Razzin color swatch that I made, I ended up with some of that seafoam type color and some pinks. So that's kind of the reason why I paired all those colors together. And I do love the Rich Razzin. I think it's a really cool color. I see lots of cool variation, various shades of, I don't know, kind of like a mauvey pink color and then the darker brownish type colors. I just think it's really cool. And I really like that seafoam right in the center. And then I actually think it pairs really well with both of the pink colors. As far as the design goes, it looks kind of like a fossil to me. I don't know if you've ever seen something called a Trilobite. I may not be pronouncing that correctly, but I think it looks very much like one of those. And I think it's kind of interesting to look at. I think the colors of it kind of lend to that look as well. I don't know, at first when I looked at it, I thought it looked like an ammonite, but then more the shape of it I think is closer to like a trilobite. So these roll designs are really fun, and the design or the final look of the shirt is all changed based upon Whether you fold the shirt before you roll it or where you roll the shirt, the pattern that you roll it, if you roll it in a straight line or if you roll it in a curve like I did this one. So there are just so many variations that you can do of this particular design. It's just a fun one to mess around with. I also like the fact that because it was inclined, it caused the dye to run or flow down the shirt, which ended up with some of those really cool flow lines, which I think add to the look of a fossil right in that very center part of the design. The flow lines almost look like little legs. So I think this one is very unique and very interesting. But what do you guys think? Do you like it? Do you like the design? Do you see what I mean about a fossil in the center? And what do you think about this color? I think that Rich Razzin is a really cool color. I also love seafoam. Seafoam is one of my favorite custom colors, dye colors. I mean, I like the pinks too, but I just think seafoam is, I don't know, it's just one of my favorite blue greenish seafoam colors. I think it's really cool. Please drop me some comments down below and let me know what you think. And if you've enjoyed watching the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.